Welcome to the Women's Sanctuary, the podcast about tending the soul of women, sisterhood, and the rise of the sacred feminine. I'm your host, Arlia Hoffman. Hello, everyone. Welcome again to the Women's Sanctuary. A sanctuary is a safe, holy space where we gather. In this space, we come to hear women's stories of transformation and living their purpose in the world. We also cover topics of soul care and aligned living. Welcome to Sanctuary, sisters. Today, I am thrilled to have my friend and author, Sharna Fabiano, with us. Sharna is an internationally recognized tango artist, certified coach, and author of Lead and Follow, the Dance of Inspired Teamwork. She brings a deep understanding of the leader-follower dynamic from social dance into the professional sphere to help individuals and teams collaborate more successfully. Over the course of her 20-year tango career, she produced dozens of workshops and retreats for women to study the leading role and was a member of the Tango Mujer, the world's first all-woman tango company. Welcome, Sharna.
Thank you, Arlia. So happy to be here.
I am thrilled to have you. I told you before we went on the air that I'm so excited about this book. I would just read the whole thing aloud for people to hear. So I guess if you ever want to do an audiobook, you maybe ought just consider me. I'm thrilled about this. I was based, on our mutual friend, Virginia Dick. I was privileged enough to be one of your participants in your study groups before the book was launched. It was published. And now here it is. It has been birthed into the world, and I'm thrilled to see it. How does it feel?
It's funny. I mean, maybe everyone who publishes a book feels this way, but it feels a little bit surreal, that all those years of editing and revising and changing, and now it looks so small to me, right? It's a small rectangle, this little stack of paper. Yeah. But it's sweet. It's a sweet feeling. Thank you.
Yeah. How did you get from tango to a book on leadership and followership?
Well, I think one thing that's really interesting and beautiful about tango is that it does place these two roles next to each other in an equal relationship, right? Rather than a hierarchical relationship. And so my path to this material comes from a very embodied place. I entered the tango world in the late 90s, and I was a follower because I'm a woman, and still in dance, it's changing a little, but most men lead, most women follow. And so I was a follower, and I had, I have a very positive association with that role. Unlike, many in the business world, or even, generally in our culture, following is thought of as undesirable. But for me, following was beautiful. It's a very technical role. It's very expressive. It's very versatile. And so I was happy to kind of live in that role. And then I was very fortunate to have some early teachers who encouraged me to learn to lead as well. And so before, I'm still 22 at this point. Before I go to graduate school, before I become a coach, like way before any of that, I have this very physical and very relational experience with both being a follower and being a leader. And so I kind of carried that with me, in my whole system for years and years. And I think it was in 2008, I met someone in a tango class. His name is Ira Chalif, and he became my mentor for this book. He walked into a tango class, and I had no idea who he was, but at the end of the class, he introduced himself as the author of The Courageous Follower. A marvelous book. And he told me all about his work, which was teaching courageous following in the nonprofit world, in the government world. And, he's worked with political leaders all over the world. So I was fascinated that someone was teaching following in that context. And he, of course, was also fascinated with how I described the fluidity and the partnership of the two roles. And so we struck up this wonderful friendship. And he was the first one to encourage me to write about followership and about these complementary roles from a dance perspective. Now, I didn't do it in 2008, obviously, but that planted the seed. Mm-hmm. And then, many years later, I think after going through my graduate program and becoming a coach, I started to see that what I learned in tango so many years ago about this partnership was so valuable, and I really wanted to share it outside the dance community in a way that could be understood, practiced, absorbed without someone having to go through the process of learning to dance. So that was the purpose, I think, behind this book. And it feels to me like, in many ways, a translation of what I learned in my body into, words and exercises that came more through my graduate work and coaching training.
Mm-hmm. What an incredible process to really attempt to translate what's happening in your body and then in your larger experience into a cohesive presentation, which you have done here. And I think you succeed because you do take the reader into what it's like to be on the dance floor periodically. Even if you're not a dancer, suddenly you are a dancer as you're reading the words. And that's extraordinary. I mean, I have some limited experience with dance, but I don't feel like it was necessary because suddenly I was dropped into having to relate to this other person and then with my own body and what to do next. It's really incredible. You say in the preface that social dancers value their dance community relationships just as much and sometimes more than their actual dance experiences. This is a surprising yet powerful perspective to take into the work environment, where we tend to see relationship building as just another strategy for professional success, not a worthwhile goal in and of itself. And that's pretty profound that, first of all, from the dance perspective, that the community becomes so important. But then, we're beginning to learn that, but I think the business world is in its infancy to recognize and understand the importance of the foundational piece of relationship.
Yeah, I think the more I sat with that awareness, right, reflecting on my own dance experience, the more I saw a parallel with the whole conversation today about sustainability and bring your whole self to work, and what are we doing here at work anyway? And the idea that who we are together really is what we do together. Mm-hmm. I think that's something I feel very much in dance and also in any kind of work. When I had my dance company, I was making performance. It was very clear to me that the people I asked to work with me, that's what determines what the performance is. Much more than, any movement material that might come out of the rehearsal. And I do believe that's true in any work environment. It's a bit of a leap of faith, though, to say, just focus on the relationship, right? It seems like utopian or something. And I think what I'm after there is not necessarily the either or, but understanding that, okay, if we're going to work together, or if we're going to build software, if we're going to, design a product line, if we're going to make clothing, whatever we're going to do, we have to, as much as we're focusing on the goal, which of course is important, we have to equally much focus on how we're relating with each other.
Yeah.
Because that will directly influence what we do every time.
So we've touched on this, but can you explain more about how this book differs from all the other books on leadership? We're talking about followership and dance, but what do you see as its main impact on our body of thinking?
I think what happens when you start to really look at the follower role is that it changes how you see the leader.
Mm.
So when you start to look from the perspective of the people who are following the leader, you just see something, you see different things. And so that's one of the biggest ways that I would say this book is different, and that it offers not only a different way of thinking, but perhaps a different set of values almost that to guide action. So if you want your followers to be engaged, right, which is something that everyone says now, right? We need employee engagement, we need team engagement, we need team players, we need everyone to be on board. That's just probably the number one thing, right? We hear in the conversation around management and organizational development. But you can't just require that, right? If you look at that from the follower point of view, what's required in order for that to happen? Like, what would inspire the follower to be engaged in the first place, and to assume that they have a choice, right? It's not just something that they do if they're, if the leader does something, there's a formula and automatically you get employee engagement, right? It doesn't work that way. So when you acknowledge that the follower is a human being, like the employee is a human being, and they have a choice in this, and there's no reason for them to choose to engage, unless it's giving them something, right? So then you have to ask, all right, then what is the role of the leader in a team, of people who have the option to engage and give themselves, or they have the option to not and do the bare minimum. And engagement in the dance system that I've laid out here goes with like a set of connection skills. So if you want...
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to touch on that because it's, this was like revolutionary for me, these pairs of skills. And in the book, you've got engagement goes with inclusion. So what does that look like from a follower's perspective, of inclusion?
I mean, yeah, inclusion. Thank you. Inclusion can mean a lot of things depending on the context. Mm-hmm. But if you imagine yourself sitting in a meeting, right, you, the employee, and, inclusion can be something like as simple as sitting in a circle, right? Or it can be as simple as everyone in the room checks in and says, how they're doing, what's up with them, but that everyone speaks. So in a room like that, if you feel included, right, whether by those strategies or in some other way, if the leader looks at you, directly, if your, input is collected the same as everyone else's. So many ways you can create inclusion. But if you feel included, then you are more likely to want to give, right, and engage. So, and again, I don't want to make it sound like it's a formula or it's like, okay, the leader just has to do a check-in and then they're done, right? All these things are fluid and dynamic and they have to be customized, right? And they have to be authentic.
Yeah, but because it's like a dance.
Exactly, right? You can't just do it the same with every person. That's another thing that, from improvised dance comes through very clearly. So if you are feeling included by your leader, that is going to make you want to contribute, right? And then on the other side, if you contribute, often that will make the leader want to include you. So it's sort of like a back and forth, and it's not a formula, but it's a way of seeing these roles as mutually influential, I would say.
Yeah, you divide the book up into 3 phases: connection, collaboration, and co-creation. And within each of those phases are the following skills and leading skills. And I found this, again, I'm going to say the word revolutionary, because we've so been taught to focus on the leadership skills, right? If it's a good leader and they're emotionally intelligent and they're smart and they're organized, how can they not fail? And then we all have the hierarchical system, which I've worked for years in servant leadership, and it's still a Sisyphean task to convince people that there are benefits to a more egalitarian, collaborative process. And so to have these skills that you have identified as playing off of each other and working hand in hand as the leader and the follower do, it just opened my eyes to the ways that, if the follower is doing this, then this is the leader's responsibility, and vice versa. I think the most enlightening one for me was boundaries. I do a lot of work with boundaries, which is a followership skill, but the leader has to set adequate structure and expectations. And there is this dance of then the follower creating boundaries so that they are enhancing and maximizing their role within that relationship. It was eye-opening for me.
Yeah, that one is really strong for me as well. And I just want to add, to make it clear, that I think no matter what your position is, right, your work, you benefit from practicing both leading and following. Mm-hmm. It really just depends on the context. There's a well-known leadership and followership scholar named Barbara Kellerman, and she adds context as part of her model for, choosing when do you need leadership, when do you need followership. And so the context is super important. And I use expectations and boundaries because I feel like they are two sides of a coin. Mm-hmm. And of course, everyone needs to do both of those things, right, in different situations. But they tend to be among the more difficult things to express in relationship, I think.
I'd say that's true.
Yeah.
I'd like to give our readers a sense of how you approach this. Would you be willing to read a bit from your introduction?
Sure. Okay. I'd love to. So I want to just say that the first paragraph I'm going to read here is a snapshot of the dance floor. So it's written in the second person, and then the second paragraph is the main text of the book. There are approximately 10 feet between your chair and the edge of the dance floor. You are seated at a small cafe table, and the tall stranger, the leader, is standing calmly in front of you. Eye contact confirms your silent agreement to become partners for the next set of dances. This moment is sacred, a tiny pocket of time in which you both acknowledge that although you are individuals, you will now come together to play the roles of leader and follower, a creative team, interdependent. You do this because you know that you cannot dance alone, that you need a partner or many partners to make the dance happen. The paradox is that in prioritizing the relationship, you discover an unexpected sense of freedom, and you achieve more together than what is possible through individual effort alone. There's something mysterious about each recognizing the need for the other that lifts both partners up and makes social dance greater than the sum of its parts. It's not just mechanical execution, it's synergy. The reciprocal nature of leading and following in social dance offers useful lessons for professional workplace interactions, although the term follower may be less familiar there. At work, too, there is power in recognizing that we can lift each other up, that we are each capable of more when we collaborate successfully together. The structure of improvised social dance offers an elegant, if unusual, framework for designing such collaborations.
Beautiful. I know in a lot of these from the dance floor descriptions, which are peppered throughout the book to help you visualize the concepts, that you use the feminine pronouns all the time. Can you speak to that?
Sure. I made a decision to do that partly because I wanted to just disrupt the assumption that the leader is always male and the follower is always female. even in dance, right, that's changing a lot. There are people like me who learn both roles, a lot of women who are learning both roles, I would say more than men. And part of that is the numbers. There are just more women in dance, in social dance than men. And so they have perhaps an extra incentive to learn both roles so they can dance more. But yeah, I think part of that was just to kind of, interrupt the brain a little bit and make people realize, actually everyone has an inner masculine and inner feminine. We can all be leaders and followers, and we benefit from seeing one another that way.
I love that because it would interrupt my brain. Go, wait, okay, yeah. What's your favorite piece of this? So I like trying to pick your favorite child, but is there a skill pair that really stuck out to you as one that you felt like was closer to your heart or more important or maybe more crucial?
Yeah, that is trying to pick your favorite child. It's typical Arlia. I don't know. I mean, they really... I wouldn't... Okay, I'll answer it this way. I wouldn't say it's my favorite, but actually, it was hard. I would say was the hardest. The last part 3, co-creation. Mm-hmm. The 2 skill pairs there are imagination and bravery and insight and style. Mm-hmm. And those 2 were the hardest to write because at this stage of the relationship, both in dance and in great teams everywhere, the roles sort of start to dissolve, right? And that itself is fascinating, mm-hmm. right? In that we get to this point where, imagine the dance partnership and they've mastered the vocabulary, they've mastered the technique, they're just moving together fluidly. They themselves sometimes forget, right? Like where the signals are coming from, who's making the decisions, or when you're in a great team working on a project, you don't remember always who said it first. You just know, yeah, that's it. And you just all orient to that, new insight. And it feels sort of magical. And I think that's in many ways the goal of any sort of creative enterprise or innovation, or progressive business. We're trying to get to that state where we have those epiphanies. And so it was a little harder to write about because it's less task-based. Mm-hmm. It's more about letting it happen, letting the roles shift. But as I was writing that, I realized we can't get there without the other stuff. Right? So even though that is the goal, we can't just say, okay, we're just going to be creative together.
Right.
Right? Because what does that mean? So we need the connection, right? Those very careful, pieces of attention to one another, the openness, right? The inclusivity. We need to invest in that. And in fact, continue revisiting that foundational layer of connection. Mm-hmm. And then all the nuts and bolts, we need that. We need, our skills. We need our deadlines. We need our boundaries. And when we have all that, it does lead relatively, I wouldn't say, again, it's not a formula, but it creates the conditions for those innovations to occur. And so I loved writing that because of knowing that. I think I liked writing those last chapters, knowing that they were the organic outcome of all the hard work, that had come before.
Well, I think that's probably somewhat reassuring to leaders who'd be like, I can't just say, let's all flow with creativity. It's all going to fall apart if I do that. And you're saying it takes all the hard work, the foundational hard work to get to that place where it's like all the machinery is in place. The proper machinery is in place. I guess the most humane system is in place to allow that creativity to happen. And that reminds me, I experienced the same thing in the work with women. They thrive in that flow, but that flow requires riverbanks, as I say. It requires the structure in which to flourish. And I think that's a fantastic gosh, I hate to use the word goal, but it's a fantastic place to arrive at and operate in, is a system that's so well founded that it can sustain and create opportunities for the flow.
Yeah, I see it I see it as scaffolding in a sense, right? There's the structure, as you say, that sort of supports this team reaching, right, the creative potential. But yeah, it doesn't just happen by magic. And in fact, in dance, and I would say, to some extent, this is true in the workplace, and perhaps that's why following has been invisible for so long or unacknowledged, is the training of the dancer who's following is actually to make it look effortless. Is all that technical training, the balance, the stability, the fast movements, the controlled movements, it serves in order to enable the vision, right, to emerge, right, to enable the leading partner, in the case of dance, to improvise freely. So, but yeah, there's a lot of hard work there, but in some ways it's harder to see it when you're at the moment of creation. You're just enjoying the success of it, but then you realize, oh, that's actually, we need to acknowledge all the pieces that happened before to get there.
Yeah. It occurs to me, it's not that the process is magic, but the result is.
Yeah. Beautifully said.
Yeah. I'm going to throw you a curveball. How do you see, or how have you experienced the pandemic affecting this work, or how people receive it or work with it? Our work environment has changed dramatically.
The topic that has come up the most for me is the connection piece, which probably won't surprise you, right? As we're all sitting at home in front of our Zoom screens. Yeah. So I've been leaning into that section a lot and asking myself, okay, if we're not physically together, right, because physical presence is so powerful, how do we still commit ourselves to those important foundational building blocks of connection? And I don't think it always means like a Zoom happy hour, that can be fatiguing. So yeah. What are creative ways we can stay connected without just being on screen? That seems to be where the emphasis is now. And, it's like one of these paradoxes again, like no one would have wished this on anyone, but now that we're forced to confront it, it's made it obvious how important that foundation is.
Mm-hmm. And how critically important physical connection is when it's available.
Yes.
Yeah. What's next for you, Sharna?
Well, I'm looking forward to the study group for this book. I'm holding 3 sessions over the next 3 months to chat with people about each of those 3 sections in the curriculum: the connection, collaboration, and co-creation. Those are the last Sundays of every month, March, April, May. So I'm really curious what people have to say for those. We're going to do some activities. It's all remote, of course.
Is that open to, are you opening that invitation?
Yes, those are public. They're free. Okay. Anyone can attend. Just sign up on my website. And there'll be the last Sundays of March, April, May, 4 p.m. Pacific, so 7 p.m. Eastern. Yeah, there'll be kind of part Q&A, part discussion, part guided activity around those 3 themes.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's exciting. We will definitely put that information in the show notes. How can people reach out to you? How can they find the book and connect with you?
The book is available everywhere. You can search for your local bookstore on IndieBound, which is my favorite way to order books, indiebound.com. You can also order it on Amazon. It's an ebook. I think right now the ebook is still on sale on Amazon Kindle. So if you're an ebook reader, you can download that. And yeah, sharnafabiano.com I keep it pretty current. So any new study groups or classes related to the book will be there.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This is a beautiful book with a lot of rich wisdom and insight and practical skills that I found to be refreshing. Like not, just they made my brain work in a new way. And that was exciting.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to hear that.
Thrilled to absorb this again and also, share it with my clients, share it with my colleagues. And
thank you so much, Arlia.
I wish it's all the best out there in the world.
Thanks. Me too. Now is like the next, what would they say, that it takes on a life of its own?
That's right. Thank you, Sharna, for joining us.
You're so welcome.
Join us next time to hear more women sharing their stories. If you enjoy these podcasts, please consider leaving a review on your favorite podcast provider. It helps people find us, and it helps our guests like Sharna Fabiano. I'm Arlia Hoffman, and this has been The Women's Sanctuary. We'll see you next time.